Welcome to the Brain Alpha. All right, let's talk about one of the biggest questions out there. Can we really live longer, healthier lives? Today, we're going to go on a journey, starting with rock-solid, peer-reviewed science and going all the way to the kind of controversial, bleeding-edge frontier of biohacking. Is there a safe blueprint for all of us? Or are some people wandering into straight-up biohazard territory? Let's dive in. So, here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at what the proven science says about slowing down aging. Then, we'll check out what happens when one guy takes all that science to the absolute extreme. From there, we'll jump into the wild world of experimental gene therapy. But then we'll get a super important reality check from a top scientist. And finally, we'll break down what all of this might actually mean for you. Okay, let's start with the bedrock. I'm not talking about fads or weird wellness trends here. Nope, we're starting with a concept that's been tested in the most rigorous way possible in science, a gold standard randomized controlled trial. The big idea is something called caloric restriction, or CR for short, and the concept is pretty simple. You just eat fewer calories than your body is used to, but, and this is key, without starving yourself of essential nutrients. For literally decades, scientists have been obsessed with this, because in study after study on animals, everything from worms to monkeys, it's been shown to extend their lifespan. But the million-dollar question has always been, does it actually work for us, for humans? Well, to find that out, researchers put together the Calorie Trial. This was a huge 2-year-long study designed to see if healthy, non-obese people could even do caloric restriction and what it would do to their bodies. This trial is exactly the kind of high-quality evidence that really forms the foundation of what we know. And the results? They were pretty significant. The group that was practicing caloric restriction managed to lose and keep off an average of 10.4% of their body weight over the entire 2 years. And just to be clear, this wasn't some quick-fix diet. This was a sustained, long-term change that had real, measurable effects. Now, this chart might look a little complicated, but trust me, it's incredibly important. It's called a consort diagram, and it basically shows you the entire flow of the study. You can see the 220 people who started, how they were split into different groups, and, this is crucial, who dropped out and why. This kind of transparency is what separates real science from just claims. It shows the researchers aren't hiding anything, and that makes their results trustworthy. Okay, so the Calorie Trial tells us that a modest caloric restriction is safe and it has clear benefits. But what happens if you take that one proven idea and you combine it with basically every other longevity theory out there, and then you push it to the absolute human limit? Well, that's where tech entrepreneur Brian Johnson and his Project Blueprint come in. He's basically turned his own body into a full-time, round-the-clock experiment, spending millions of dollars a year to measure everything and try to reverse his biological age. It's what's known as an N-of-1 experiment, a study where there's only one subject, himself. So let's take a peek at his fuel source. This is his super strict daily diet. And notice that 10% caloric restriction. Yep, that's right in line with the Calorie Trial we just talked about. But of course, he goes way further, being incredibly precise about every gram of protein, carb, and fat, all from a plant-based, nutrient-dense diet. For him, everything is measured, everything is tracked. His whole system is built on these 4 pillars, and they're all grounded in longevity science. It's about tracking his biological age, not just his birthday. It's about metabolic health through his diet, preserving muscle with strength training, and balancing his hormones with perfect sleep. Up to this point, pretty much everything he's doing is just an extreme version of established, evidence-based ideas. But Brian's experiment doesn't just stop with diet, sleep, and exercise. Oh no, he is pushing far, far beyond what's established into one of the most speculative and, frankly, controversial frontiers of modern medicine. And this leads us to a question that sounds like it's straight out of a sci-fi movie, but it's becoming real. What if, instead of just optimizing your lifestyle, you could directly edit your own genetic code to fight the aging process itself? So, to try this, Johnson actually flew to a clinic in Honduras for an unapproved gene therapy. It's designed to boost a protein called follistatin, which basically tells your body to build more muscle. The hope is that this makes you stronger and slows down aging. But here's the kicker. This therapy is not approved by the FDA, and it's done completely outside of U.S. regulatory oversight. And taking this experimental leap, well, it's not just a huge scientific gamble, it's also incredibly expensive. We're talking a reported $25,000 for a single treatment. This is truly the Wild West of anti-aging, a frontier that's really only accessible to people with very, very deep pockets. Now, you can imagine doing something this radical and broadcasting it all over YouTube for everyone to see. It definitely sparked a strong reaction from the scientific community. So to balance all the hype, we absolutely need a reality check from a leading expert in the field of aging. Enter Dr. Matt Kaberlein. He is a highly respected scientist from the University of Washington who literally studies the biology of aging for a living. And he has some very serious concerns when this kind of public self-experimentation gets presented like it's a scientific breakthrough. And he does not mince words. In his critique, Dr. Kaberlein warns, science should not be done on YouTube. There is absolutely no reason to trust these people. They are trying to sell you something. It's a pretty stark reminder about the difference between real scientific work and, potential marketing. So here you can really see the conflict in a nutshell. On one side, you've got Johnson claiming positive results, a 7% bump in muscle mass and a drop in his pace of aging score, which is a metric that tries to measure how fast his body is aging on a cellular level. But then you have Dr. Kaberlein pointing out the massive asterisks here. There is zero long-term safety data for this stuff in humans, and the very metrics being used to claim it's a success are, in his expert opinion, pretty unconvincing. And Dr. Kaberlein highlights 4 huge risks. First, the long-term side effects are a complete unknown. Second, the so-called kill switch that's designed to turn the therapy off might not even work perfectly. Third, there's a small but very real risk that the therapy could permanently change your own DNA. And finally, this one's critical. These offshore clinics don't have to report when things go wrong, so we might never even hear about the failures or if people get hurt. Okay. Phew. We've gone from a rigorous clinical trial to a super extreme personal experiment, and then we got a very stark scientific warning. So after all that, what is the actual takeaway for you and me? The key lesson from all this is not to go book a flight to Honduras for some unapproved gene therapy. No, the real practical insight from Project Blueprint is actually way simpler. What gets measured gets managed. The core idea isn't about the extreme tactics. It's about creating a data-driven feedback loop for your own health. So here's how you can actually use that philosophy safely. You don't need $1 million lab. Just start with some baseline blood tests to know your numbers. Then focus on the pillars we know for sure work. Improve your sleep, add in some resistance training to keep your muscle, and eat more nutrient-dense whole foods. And here's the most important part. After a few months, retest your numbers and see what actually worked for you. That cycle, measure, intervene, measure again, that's the real blueprint. And that really leaves us with this final, crucial question. In this whole quest for a longer, healthier life, where do we draw the line between proven science and our own personal discovery? How much risk is too much? Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up, and help us build the hype. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.